April 7, 1945, 2:17 p.m., East China Sea. USS New Jersey fires. 2 shells scream across 12 miles of ocean. They slam into the Japanese cruiser Yahagi at 25,500 feet per s. They do not explode. They punch through 4 inches of hardened armor like a knife through paper. They keep going through the crew quarters, through the engine room, through the opposite hull. 40 feet of penetration in half a second. Then they detonate. The explosion rips Yahagi apart from the inside. Her magazine ignites. Secondary blasts consume what remains. 427 feet of warship splits into 3 pieces. 446 sailors die instantly. The ones who survive wish they had not. 30 seconds. 2 shells. 1 cruiser erased from existence. On New Jersey's bridge, the crew stands frozen. Nobody speaks. They have just witnessed something that should not be possible. They have just watched a weapon that rewrites the rules of naval warfare. That weapon exists because of one man, a factory worker from Pittsburgh, a metallurgist named Harold Morrison, 26 years old. No military training, no political connections, no authority to demand anything from anyone. He created the shell that Japanese admirals will call demon bullets from hell. The shell that turned the mightiest battleships ever built into floating coffins. But here is what haunts me. What keeps me awake at night. 6 months before Yahagi died, 439 American sailors charged to their deaths at Samar. They attacked Yamato with guns that could not scratch or paint. They knew they would die. They did it anyway. Morrison's shells could have saved them, every single one. But those shells were 300 meters away, loaded in battleships, sailing the wrong direction. This is the story of how one ordinary man created an extraordinary weapon and the tragedy of what happened when it arrived too late. December 7, 1941, 7:48 a.m. Pearl Harbor. Japanese bombs fall like rain. Battleship Row erupts in flame. USS Arizona's magazine explodes. 1,177 men die in 9 minutes. USS Oklahoma capsizes. 429 sailors trapped inside, pounding on the hull as water fills their lungs. Some survive for 16 days in air pockets before rescue teams reach them. Most do not. 243 Americans dead before breakfast. 8 battleships destroyed or crippled. The Pacific Fleet gutted in 2 hours. Japan celebrates. Emperor Hirohito declares, "The divine mission has begun." Admiral Yamamoto privately tells his staff they have awakened a sleeping giant. America mourns. President Roosevelt calls it a date which will live in infamy. Mothers across the nation receive telegrams that begin with deep regret. But the nightmare is just starting. Over the next 6 months, Japanese forces sweep across the Pacific with terrifying speed. The Philippines fall. 23,000 American and Filipino soldiers surrender at Bataan. They begin the death march. 10,000 will not survive it. Singapore collapses. 80,000 British troops captured in the worst defeat in British military history. The Dutch East Indies crumble. Burma falls. Wake Island, Guam, Hong Kong. Island after island, victory after victory. Nothing can stop them. Clears throat. American commanders throw everything they have at the Japanese fleet. Dive bombers attack at suicidal angles. Torpedo planes fly through walls of anti-aircraft fire. Submarines stalk enemy convoys in waters so dangerous that 1 in 5 boats never returns. Nothing works. Not against the battleships Yamato, Musashi, Nagato, Haruna, Kirishima. These ships carry armor thicker than bank vaults. When American shells hit them, the rounds shatter on impact. They explode outside the hull. The blast dissipates against 16 inches of face-hardened steel. The ships sail on, undamaged, unstoppable. Invincible. Naval intelligence runs the calculations again and again and again. The conclusion never changes. At combat ranges beyond 15,000 yards, American armor-piercing shells cannot penetrate Japanese capital ships. Read that again. Cannot. Not difficult. Not unlikely. Cannot. Bigger armor wins. That was the doctrine. Japan built the biggest armor in history. America has no answer. By mid-1942, the casualty reports tell a story written in blood. Cruisers sunk, destroyers torn apart, thousands of young men burned, drowned, or blown to pieces. Military planners in Washington stare at the numbers and feel something they have never felt before. Despair. They are losing. Not just battles, the war. They are losing the war because their weapons cannot hurt the enemy's most powerful ships, and nobody knows how to fix it. August 1942, Naval Gun Factory, Washington, D.C. Dr. Edward Chambers has spent 30 years studying how steel breaks. His colleagues at MIT and Caltech consider his specialty boring, too narrow, too obscure. Who cares how metal fractures under stress? Tonight, Chambers cares. He has been analyzing every failed shell casing from the Pacific, every round that bounced, every projectile that shattered, every piece of American ordnance that hit Japanese armor and did nothing. He gathers his team, 6 engineers running on coffee and desperation. They have been working 18-hour days for 3 months. They have found nothing. Chambers picks up a piece of chalk. His hand trembles slightly. We have been asking the wrong question. The room goes quiet. We keep asking how to make a bigger shell, how to add more explosive, how to increase velocity. He pauses. We should be asking how to make a shell that does not waste its energy. In the back of the room, a young man leans forward. Harold Morrison, 24 years old, Pittsburgh steelworker. He enlisted 3 months after Pearl Harbor. The Navy put him here because he understood metallurgy better than most professors. Morrison has a gift. He can look at a piece of metal and understand its soul, how it will bend, where it will break, what it can endure. His hands are still calloused from the factory floor. Dr. Chambers, what do you mean by wasting energy? Chambers draws on the chalkboard. A shell hitting armor. An explosion outside the hull. When our shells hit Japanese battleships, they detonate on contact. All that destructive force releases against the armor. The armor absorbs it. The ship survives. He draws again. A shell penetrating, traveling, detonating inside. But what if the shell did not explode on contact? What if it punched through first, traveled deep into the ship, and then detonated inside the magazine, the engine room, below the waterline where no armor exists? Silence. Then someone laughs, not cruelly, nervously. Sir, that is impossible. Impact forces exceed 50,000 Gs. No fuse can survive that. The shell would either detonate on contact or be destroyed completely. I know, Chambers says quietly. That is why no one has done it. That is why everyone assumes it cannot be done. He turns to face his team. I am asking if we want to try anyway. Morrison does not hesitate. Yes. The Navy Bureau of Ordnance rejects the proposal in 2 weeks. Theoretically interesting, the response reads. Practically impossible. Recommend focusing on conventional improvements. Chambers crumples the letter, throws it in the trash, looks at Morrison. They say, no. Morrison's jaw tightens. Then we do it without them. Chambers understands what the young man is suggesting. Unauthorized weapons development, theft of military resources, court-martial offense, prison, disgrace, the end of everything they have worked for. Morrison does not blink. I know steel. I know what it can do. Everyone thinks hardness and brittleness go together. They do not. Not if you understand the crystal structure. Not if you heat treat it exactly right. I can make a shell body that punches through 16 in of armor without shattering. And the fuse? I will figure it out. Chambers should say no. He should protect his career, his pension, his reputation. He thinks about the casualty reports, the young men burning alive in the Pacific. Get me the materials. We start tonight. 4 months of secret work, an abandoned warehouse in Virginia. Morrison calls old friends from the Pittsburgh mills. Specialized steel alloys arrive in unmarked trucks. No paperwork, no records. If anyone discovers what they are doing, they are finished. The shell body comes first. Morrison develops a heat treatment process unlike anything in existence. Heats the steel to exactly 1647 degrees Fahrenheit, holds it for precisely 42 minutes, quenches it. In oil at a specific rate. He calculates through trial and error. The result is metal that should not exist, hard enough to punch through armor, tough enough not to shatter on impact. His colleagues do not believe the test results until they see them with their own eyes. But the fuse is the problem. Every design fails. A mechanical firing pin gets destroyed by impact forces. A pressure-sensitive detonator triggers too early. An electrical system shorts out from the shock. Morrison tries 47 different configurations, 47 failures. 3 weeks without going home. He sleeps on a cot in the warehouse, eats cold beans from a can. His wife sends letters asking if he is still alive. December 1942. 3 Morrison sits alone in the warehouse, surrounded by broken prototypes and failed calculations. His eyes burn, his hands shake. He has nothing left. He is about to give up. Then a thought hits him. So simple he almost laughs. So obvious he cannot believe no one saw it before. He has been trying to make a fuse that survives impact. What if he designed one that uses impact? His hands start moving before his brain catches up. A glass capsule. 2 chemicals separated inside. Impact crushes the capsule. The chemicals mix. They ignite after a precise delay, 33 milliseconds. Just long enough for the shell to travel 40 feet into a ship's interior. The harder the impact, the better it works. Morrison runs to Chambers' house, pounds on the door at 4 a.m. until the older man answers in his pajamas. Chambers stares at the design for 5 full minutes. His hands start trembling. My God, why did no one think of this before? Because everyone was trying to make fuses survive impact. Morrison's voice is hoarse from exhaustion. I designed one. That needs it. January 1943, first full test. A target built from Japanese armor specifications. 16 in of face-hardened steel behind it. Barriers simulating a ship's internal compartments. First shot misses, second shot hits. The shell shatters. Morrison does not sleep for 2 weeks. He adjusts the alloy composition. Changes the heat treatment by 4 seconds. Modifies the chemical mixture in the fuse. Third test. The shell strikes at 2,500 feet per s. It does not shatter. It punches through, creates a perfect circular hole, continues through the first barrier, the second, the third. 38 feet of penetration. Then it detonates. The explosion is catastrophic. Confined space amplifies the blast. Metal fragments shred. Everything within 50 feet. The entire test structure collapses into smoking rubble. Chambers stands in the wreckage. Tears stream down his face. He does not bother wiping them away. We just made every battleship in the world obsolete. Admiral Ernest King sees the test footage 48 hours later. He watches it 3 times without speaking. Then he picks up his phone. This project is now classified top secret. No one outside this room knows these shells exist. Not our allies, not Congress. No one. He looks at the young metallurgist from Pittsburgh. You have 8 months to full production. Do not fail me. Morrison has done the impossible. He has created a weapon that can kill Yamato. A weapon that can end the reign of the battleship. A weapon that can save thousands of American lives. But creating it is only half the battle. Because between Morrison and victory stands something more dangerous than Japanese armor. Something more stubborn than 16 in of steel. The United States Navy bureaucracy. In Part 2, we will meet Admiral Theodore Chandler, a man who believes the Mark 8 program is a waste of resources. A man who will do everything in his power to kill it. And we will witness the battle that nearly destroyed Morrison's weapon before it ever fired a shot in anger. The shells are ready, but will they reach the men who need them? Or will they rot in warehouses while American sailors burn? In Part 1, we met Harold Morrison, a 26-year-old metallurgist from Pittsburgh who created the impossible. A shell that punches through 16 in of Japanese armor and detonates inside enemy ships. The secret tests in Virginia proved it worked. Admiral King himself approved production. The Mark 8 Super Heavy was born. But here's a number that will haunt you. Between the Mark 8's approval and its first combat deployment, 14 months passed. 14 months of meetings, 14 months of paperwork, 14 months of American sailors dying because the weapon that could save them sat in warehouses. Why? Because convincing the Navy to build the weapon was one thing. Convincing them to use it was war. And the man standing in Morrison's way wore the same uniform as him, Rear Admiral Theodore Chandler, 58 years old, career officer. He commanded battleships before Morrison learned to walk. He survived Pearl Harbor. He fought at Midway. He believed with absolute certainty that he understood naval warfare better than any laboratory scientist ever could. And he thought the Mark 8 program was a complete waste of resources. November 1943, Washington, D.C., Navy Department Building. Morrison stands at attention in Chandler's office. He has prepared for this meeting for 3 weeks. Charts, graphs, test data, photographs of destroyed armor plates, everything he needs to prove the Mark 8 works. Chandler does not look at any of it. Lieutenant Morrison, I have reviewed your proposal for expanded Mark 8 training. My answer is no. Morrison keeps his voice steady. May I ask why, sir? Because battleship warfare is finished. Chandler slaps a folder under his desk. Intelligence reports, casualty figures, battle assessments from the Pacific. Leyte Gulf proved it. Aircraft sank Musashi. Aircraft will sink Yamato. We do not need fancy shells. We need more carriers, more planes, more pilots. Sir, aircraft could not have stopped Kurita at Samar if our battleships had been there with Mark 8 ammunition. Chandler cuts him off. His face reddens. His voice rises. If. I have been fighting naval wars while you were learning arithmetic. The future is aviation. Your shells are a relic of the past. An expensive relic that diverts steel and resources from weapons that actually matter. Morrison feels his jaw tighten. He knows he should stay quiet. Arguing with an admiral is career suicide. He speaks anyway. Respectfully, sir, the tests do not lie. Mark 8 penetrates any armor the Japanese possess. One Iowa-class battleship with proper ammunition could destroy Yamato in a surface engagement. The mathematics are clear. Chandler laughs. It is not a kind sound. Mathematics. He spits the word like a curse. You are talking about a laboratory fantasy that has never been proven in combat. Theory is not reality. Lieutenant Dottie leans forward. His voice drops to something cold, something dangerous. Get out of my office, and if I hear you have been bothering other admirals with this nonsense, I will have you transferred to a supply depot in Alaska. Do you understand me? Morrison understands perfectly. His career is over. His weapon will rot in storage. American sailors will keep dying because one stubborn admiral refuses to see what is right in front of his face. He leaves Chandler's office feeling like someone has punched him in the stomach. 3 years of work, Months of sleepless nights. The breakthrough that could change the war. All of it meaningless because of politics and pride. But Morrison does not know that someone has been watching this fight. Someone with access to information that could change everything. Commander Sarah Chun is 34 years old, one of the few female officers in naval intelligence. She has spent 2 years intercepting and translating Japanese communications. She knows things that admirals do not know. She sees patterns that commanders may miss, and she has been following the Mark 8 program since the beginning point 3 days after Morrison's meeting with Chandler. Chun finds him in the officer's mess. She sits down across from him without asking permission. You need to see something. They move to a secure room in the Navy Department basement. Chun spreads photographs across the table. Intelligence reports, translated Japanese documents. These are intercepts from Japanese Naval Command after Samar. She taps the papers. They are terrified, Lieutenant. Not of our carriers, not of our torpedoes, of our guns. Morrison stares at the documents. His Japanese is limited. Chun translates the key passages. Survivors from Kurita's fleet reported that American shell performance exceeded all estimates. Several hits on the heavy cruiser. Kumano displayed penetration characteristics inconsistent with known American ammunition. Japanese engineers cannot explain the damage patterns. Morrison's heart starts racing. Kumano. We fired at her during the pursuit after Samar. Our gunnery officer loaded Mark 8 when she was identified as a heavy cruiser. Chun nods. One shell went completely through her citadel, entered port side, passed through 3 bulkheads, exited starboard, detonated outside after breaking her keel. That should not be possible. Our test showed internal detonation. Your test used stationary targets. Kumano was moving, heeling to port. The shell passed through at an angle that carried it completely through before the fuse triggered. Chun leans forward. Her eyes are intense. But here is the important part. Japanese engineers examined the wreckage. They have no idea how we did it. Their reports describe it as impossible. They think it might be some kind of new explosive compound. She gathers the papers. The enemy is scared, Lieutenant. They do not understand what hit them, and they are already changing their tactics because of it. Morrison sees the opportunity. Commander, can you get these intercepts to Admiral Chandler? I already tried. He dismissed them as translation errors. Chun smiles. It is not a happy expression. But I know someone who will not dismiss them. Admiral Raymond Spruance. He is taking command of 5th Fleet in January, and he listens. December 1943, Pearl Harbor. Morrison stands before Admiral Spruance in a briefing room overlooking the harbor, where the war began. 3 years ago, this water burned with American blood. Now it might witness the birth of a weapon that can end Japanese naval supremacy forever. Unlike Chandler, Spruance asks questions, detailed questions. He wants to understand the metallurgy, the fuse timing, the penetration physics, the production requirements. Morrison explains everything. He uses diagrams, test data. The Japanese intercepts Chun provided. When he finishes, Spruance is silent for a long moment. His face reveals nothing. Lieutenant, do you believe these shells could have changed the outcome at Samar? Yes, sir, absolutely. One battleship with Mark 8 ammunition could have stopped Kurita's entire force. 439 men would still be alive. Spruance stands. He walks to the window, looks out at Battleship Row. Then we need a demonstration. A proper demonstration with senior commanders observing. Not a secret test in Virginia. A full-scale proof that no one can deny or dismiss. He turns back to Morrison. I will arrange it. You have 6 weeks to prepare. One chance, one test. Make it count. Morrison has his opportunity. One shot to prove everything. If he fails, the Mark 8 dies, his career ends, and American sailors keep dying in ships with useless ammunition. He does not intend to fail, February 5-10, 1945, Kahula Island, Hawaii. The Navy has constructed a target range unlike anything Morrison has seen before. Captured Japanese armor plates, a full-scale mock-up of a battleship citadel, 16 in, of face-hardened steel, internal compartments simulating engine rooms and magazines, a flooded section to test underwater detonation effects. This is not a laboratory experiment. This is a simulation of killing Yamato. 16 senior officers sit in an observation bunker half a mile away. Admirals, captains, ordnance specialists, the men who will decide whether the Mark 8 lives or dies. Admiral Chandler is among them. His expression makes clear he expects to watch Morrison fail publicly and completely. He has brought his own staff to document what he assumes will be an embarrassing disaster. USS Iowa is anchored 12 miles offshore. Her forward turret is loaded with 3 Mark 8 shells. Morrison has personally inspected each one, checked the fuse assemblies, verified the heat treatment records, examined the alloy composition certificates. Everything is perfect. Everything must be perfect. His hands are sweating. His heart pounds. Against his ribs, everything depends on the next 10 minutes. His career, his reputation, the lives of sailors who do not even know this test is happening. Commence firing. Admiral Spruance gives the order. His voice is calm, almost bored, as if this is routine. It is not routine. It is the most important moment of Morrison's life. The radio crackles. Iowa's forward turret rotates slightly, adjusting for wind, for temperature, for the Earth's rotation. There is a pause. It lasts 3 seconds. It feels like 3 years. Then thunder. The 16-in gun fires. The sound reaches the observation bunker 2 seconds later. A physical force that rattles the windows, shakes dust from the ceiling, makes Morrison's chest vibrate. Through high-powered binoculars, he tracks the shell's path. Time seems to slow. The projectile is invisible at this distance, moving too fast for human eyes. But the impact is not invisible. The armor plate does not shatter. It does not crack. It simply ceases to exist where the shell struck. A perfect circular hole 18 in diameter, punched clean through 16 in of the hardest steel Japan can manufacture. Behind the plate, a concrete wall shows the exit wound. The shell kept going. The detonation comes 3 seconds later. A ball of fire erupts from inside the mock structure. Walls blow outward from the inside, not from the impact point. From 40 feet deeper. Nobody in the bunker speaks. Second shot. Spruance says. His voice has changed. There's something in it now. Something like hunger. Iowa fires again. This shell strikes the Citadel mock-up directly, center mass. Maximum armor thickness. Morrison holds his breath. The shell penetrates the outer armor, continues through internal partitions, keeps going and going and going. It detonates in the magazine simulation room. The entire structure collapses. Steel beams twist like paper. Concrete walls vaporize. If this were Yamato, her magazines would have just cooked off. 72,000 tons of battleship would be heading for the bottom of the Pacific. Third shot. Spruance orders. The final shell targets the flooded compartment. Water simulation. Testing whether the weapon works below the waterline where torpedoes usually strike. Impact. Penetration. Detonation. Water does not compress. The explosion's force has nowhere to go. The compartment does not rupture. It vaporizes. A geyser of water and steel fragments shoots 200 feet into the sky. Debris rains down for 30 seconds. The observation bunker is absolutely silent. Morrison looks at Admiral Chandler, the man who called his work a fantasy, the man who threatened to send him to Alaska. Chandler's face has gone white. His hands are trembling. He looks like someone who has just watched his entire understanding of naval warfare crumble into dust, Spruance turns to the assembled officers. Gentlemen, you have just witnessed what the Mark 8 a PC Super Heavy shell can do. 3 shots, 3 catastrophic kills. Any questions? Chandler clears his throat. His voice is, Admiral, I may have underestimated. You did. Spruance does not let him finish. His voice is ice. Lieutenant Morrison's weapon is not a relic. It is the most effective naval armament the United States possesses. And beginning immediately, every capital ship commander will receive training on its proper deployment. He pauses, lets the words sink in. The battleship is not obsolete, gentlemen. We simply did not know how to use it. Now we do. Morrison feels his legs go weak. Months of fighting, weeks of preparation, years of doubt and rejection. It is over. He has won. But Spruance is not finished. There is one more thing. He turns to Morrison. Intelligence reports indicate the Japanese are planning something. A suicide mission using their remaining battleships, including Yamato. The room goes still. Yamato, the monster. The unsinkable fortress. Our carriers will strike first, but if any surface engagement occurs, Spruance pauses, looks directly at Morrison. Your shells need to be ready. They will be. Sir. Morrison leaves the observation bunker, believing the hardest battle is behind him. The Mark 8 has proven itself. The Navy has accepted it. Training will begin. Production will accelerate. He is wrong. 3 days later, Commander Chun contacts him with urgent news. A decoded Japanese message from Imperial Navy headquarters in Tokyo. Morrison, her voice is tense. We have a problem. What kind of problem? The Japanese know. Morrison's blood goes cold. What do you mean they know? A captured American pilot shot down over the Philippines last month. He mentioned special ammunition during interrogation. He did not know details, just rumors he heard aboard his carrier. Chun's next words hit Morrison like a physical blow. Japanese intelligence has been collecting reports ever since. Shell damage that does not match our known weapons. Penetration. Depths that exceed their calculations. The strange case of Kumano. She pauses. They do not understand how we did it, but they know something has changed. And they are already working on countermeasures. The secret is out. In Part 3, we will witness the deadliest game of cat and mouse in naval history. The Japanese scrambling to defend against a weapon they cannot understand. The Americans racing to deploy before the enemy adapts. And the final desperate voyage of Yamato herself. Operation Tengo is coming. The largest battleship ever built is sailing to her death. But she will not go quietly. And Harold Morrison will watch as everything he built faces its ultimate test. Let me remind you where we have been. A metallurgist from Pittsburgh named Harold Morrison created the impossible. A shell that punches through 16 in of Japanese armor and explodes inside enemy ships. The Navy rejected it. Admiral Chandler called it a fantasy. But Admiral Spruance witnessed the demonstration at Kahulo. 3 shots, 3 catastrophic kills. The Navy finally believed. Then, Commander Chun delivered devastating news. A captured American pilot had talked during interrogation. Japanese intelligence knew something had changed. They did not understand what, but they were already working on countermeasures. Here's a number that should terrify you. Within 6 weeks of that intelligence leak, Japanese Naval Command issued 17 different emergency directives to their remaining fleet. 17 attempts to counter a weapon they could not understand. This was no longer a test. This was war. March 3rd, 1945. Tokyo, Imperial Navy Headquarters. Admiral Somu Toyota stares at photographs spread across the conference table. Damage reports from surviving ships. Engineering analyses that make no sense. The strange case of the heavy cruiser Kumano. Her keel broken by a single shell that passed completely through her hull. 14 senior officers sit in silence. The highest-ranking naval commanders Japan has left. They have gathered for an emergency meeting that none of them wanted to attend. Americans have developed a new type of armor-piercing shell. Toyota's intelligence chief speaks carefully. His voice is steady, but his hands tremble. We do not know the exact mechanism, but our analysis suggests it detonates after penetrating armor, not on impact. Inside the ship where no protection exists, Toyota does not react. His face is stone, but everyone in the room sees his jaw tighten. What countermeasures do you recommend? There are no effective countermeasures. Sir. The words hang in the air like poison gas. If the shell detonates inside the ship, no amount of external armor can protect vital areas. We would need to completely redesign our damage control systems, add internal armor layers, restructure magazine placement. How long would that take? Years, Admiral. Years we do not have. The room falls silent. Every officer present understands what this means. Yamato, Nagato, Haruna. The pride of the Imperial Navy, their armor has been rendered meaningless. The ships they believed invincible can now be killed by weapons. They cannot stop. Japanese commanders respond with desperation. They issue orders. Ships must avoid surface. Engagements with American battleships at all costs. New evasive maneuvers, zigzag patterns designed to prevent accurate gunnery, smoke screens, night operations only. They even experiment with adding internal bulkheads. Emergency welding crews work around the clock on surviving vessels, hoping to stop shells that have already penetrated outer armor. None of it will matter, but the Americans face their own crisis. March 15, 1945. The War Production Board announces they are cutting Mark 8 production by 40%. Steel shortages. The invasion of Japan is planned for late 1945. MacArthur's staff demands artillery shells for ground forces, tank ammunition, infantry weapons. The generals do not understand naval warfare. They see battleships as obsolete. Morrison receives the news while training gunners at Pearl Harbor. He immediately requests a meeting with Admiral Spruance. Sir, we cannot reduce production now. The Japanese know about the shells. If we do not have enough ammunition when we need it most. Spruance shakes his head. It is out of my hands, Lieutenant Commander. The decision came from Washington. MacArthur's people argued that artillery, shells for the ground invasion take priority, but one Mark 8 shell can sink a battleship. Ground artillery cannot do that. I know, but the generals do not see it that way. Spruance pauses. His face is grim. There is something else. There was an accident at the Dahlgren Proving Ground last week. A Mark 8 shell detonated prematurely. During test firing, 3 men were killed. Morrison feels his blood go cold. What caused it? They are investigating, but some people in Washington are using it as evidence that the shells are unreliable. They want to cancel the program entirely. Morrison's world tilts. Everything he has worked for, everything those men at Samar died for, it is slipping away because of politics and fear and budget meetings. Sir, give me one chance. Let me prove these shells work in combat. Real combat, not against armor plates. Against Japanese warships. Spruance studies the young officer for a long moment. His eyes are calculating, measuring. There may be an opportunity. Intelligence indicates the Japanese are planning a major operation. Something involving their remaining battleships. He pauses. If Yamato sorties, he does not need to finish the sentence. Morrison understands. The ultimate test is coming. April 6, 1945. Operation Tengo begins. Yamato departs Tokushima with a task force of 1 light cruiser and 8 destroyers. She carries only enough fuel for a one-way trip to Okinawa. Her mission is suicide. Beat yourself. Fight as an unsinkable gun platform until destroyed. 2,778 sailors aboard. Most of them know they will never return. They have written their death poems. They have burned their personal letters. They have said goodbye to families they will never see again. American submarines spot the force within hours. Reports flood into Fifth Fleet headquarters. The monster is moving. Vice Admiral Mark Mitcher commands Task Force 58, nearly 400 aircraft from 11 carriers. He begins preparing a massive airstrike. Dive bombers, torpedo planes, fighters for escort. But Morrison has different orders. USS Missouri and USS New Jersey have been detached from carrier escort duty. They are racing south at flank speed. Their magazines are loaded with Mark 8 shells. Admiral Spruance has given Morrison his chance. If the airstrike fails to sink Yamato, the battleships will finish her. April 7, 1945, 12:32 p.m. East China Sea. The first wave of American aircraft finds Yamato 80 miles north of Okinawa. 200 planes. They swarm the massive battleship like hornets attacking a bear. Yamato's anti-aircraft guns fill the sky with steel. Her main batteries fire Senkaiden shells designed to explode and scatter thousands of incendiary fragments. American pilots die, but more keep coming. The first torpedo hits at 12:41 p.m. port side. The explosion tears a hole in Yamato's hull, but her armor holds. Damage control teams rush to contain flooding. A second torpedo strikes at 12:45, then a third. Yamato begins listing to port. Her captain orders counter-flooding, sacrificing compartments on the starboard side to keep the ship level. By 1 p.m., Yamato has absorbed 8 torpedo hits. She is wounded, bleeding oil into the sea, but still fighting, still dangerous, still sailing. Morrison stands on Missouri's bridge, listening to radio reports, watching the tactical display. Sir, the radar operator's voice is tight. Yamato's speed has dropped to 12 knots. She is turning north, trying to escape. Captain William Callahan turns to Morrison. How far? 43 miles, sir. Within gun range in 90 minutes. Callahan hesitates. His orders are to engage only if necessary. The airstrike should be enough, but should and will are different words. Captain Morrison's voice is steady. Request permission. To prepare Mark 8 ammunition for main battery. Callahan studies the tactical display. Yamato is wounded but not dead. If she somehow escapes the airstrike, if she reaches Okinawa, if those 18 guns start firing on American troops, do it. Morrison races to the magazine. Within minutes, Mark 8 shells are being loaded into Missouri's forward turrets. 9 guns, 27 tons of armor-piercing devastation. They never get the chance to fire at Yamato. 2:23 p.m. Yamato's magazines explode. The blast is visible from nearly 200 miles away. A mushroom cloud rises 6,000 feet into the sky. The fireball is brighter than the sun. The largest battleship ever built breaks in half. Her bow rises vertically, points at the sky like a finger accusing heaven, then she slides beneath the waves. 2,498 sailors die. Only 269 survive. Morrison watches the distant explosion through binoculars. He feels nothing. No joy, no triumph, just a strange emptiness. The Mark 8 shells did not kill Yamato. Aircraft did, torpedoes and bombs. The weapon he created never faced its ultimate test, or so he thinks. Because while Missouri races toward Yamato, USS New Jersey has encountered a different target. The light cruiser Yahagi, part of Yamato's escort force. She has become separated during the air attack. She is limping north at 8 knots. Her engineering space is flooded. Her crew, desperately trying to save their ship. New Jersey's lookouts spot her at 2:15 p.m. Captain Carl Holden makes a decision that will prove Morrison right. Load Mark 8. All turrets. The first salvo fires at 2:17 p.m., range 22,000 yards. 9 shells arc across the gray Pacific sky. 3 miss, 4 strike the water short, 2 find their target. The shells hit Yahagi's port side almost simultaneously. They punch through 4 in of armor like paper. They continue through crew quarters, through the engine room, through the opposite hull. They detonate in the magazine. Yahagi does not sink. She disappears. The internal explosion is so violent that her hull splits into 3 pieces. Secondary detonations consume what remains. 446 sailors die instantly. The ship that took 3 years to build ceases to exist in 30 seconds. New Jersey's crew stands in stunned silence. They have fired 2 shells and erased an enemy cruiser from existence. News of Yahagi's destruction reaches Pearl Harbor within hours. Admiral Spruance reads the after-action report 3 times, making sure he understands correctly. 2 shells, 30 seconds, complete annihilation. The Mark 8 has proven itself in combat. Within days, every battleship commander in the Pacific receives updated tactical orders. Mark 8 ammunition is to be used against any armored target, not just capital ships. The shells are too effective to hold in reserve. Japanese naval intelligence intercepts fragments of American communications about the engagement. They cannot understand what happened to Yahagi. Their reports describe some kind of super weapon that caused instantaneous destruction. Morale in the Imperial Navy collapses. Surviving ships refuse to leave port. Commanders invent excuses to avoid surface engagements. The war at sea is effectively over. The numbers tell the story. Before Mark 8 deployment, American battleships averaged 4.2 shells per confirmed hit on armored targets. After deployment, the average drops to 2.1. Effectiveness doubles. Ammunition expenditure halves. Japanese surface losses in the final 4 months of the war exceed the previous 2 years combined. Not because of more battles, because each battle is more lethal. The production cuts are reversed. Steel allocation for Mark 8 shells increases by 60%. The accident at Dahlgren is traced to a manufacturing defect, not a design flaw. The program's critics go silent. Morrison is promoted to lieutenant commander in June 1945. Admiral Spruance personally pins the Navy Cross on his chest for developing a weapon that saved countless American lives. The citation reads impressive. Words about innovation and dedication. But Morrison knows the truth. He did not save enough. Not at Samar. Not fast enough to prevent Yamato's sailors from dying in a hopeless mission. The war ends in August 1945. Japan surrenders. The Pacific falls silent. Harold Morrison returns home to Pittsburgh, carrying memories of shells and ships and men who will never grow old. But this story has one more chapter. What happened to the man who changed naval warfare? What became of the weapon that made battleships obsolete? And what secret did the Navy keep hidden for 50 years? In Part 4, we will discover the truth about the Mark 8's final chapter. The Cold War tests that proved its power exceeded even wartime estimates. The Japanese engineers who examined the shells and wept. And the question that haunted Harold Morrison until his final days: what if we had been there at Samar? The answer, when it finally came, would break his heart. Let me take you back to where this journey began. A metallurgist from Pittsburgh named Harold Morrison had an idea that everyone called impossible. A shell that could punch through 16 in of Japanese armor and detonate inside enemy ships. He fought bureaucracy. He survived rejection. He watched 439 Americans die at Samar because his weapon was not there to save them. Then came redemption. The demonstration at Kahula. The destruction of the cruiser Yahagi in 30 seconds. The collapse of Japanese naval morale. The Mark 8 Super Heavy shell had changed the Pacific War, but what happened to the man who created it? This story has one final twist, one that nobody expected. Because success, as Morrison would discover, sometimes carries a price heavier than failure. The war ended on August 15, 1945. Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's surrender. Sailors danced on the decks of American warships. The Pacific fell silent after years of thunder. Lieutenant Commander Harold Morrison was aboard USS Missouri when the news came. He stood alone on the fantail, watching the sunset paint the ocean. Gold and crimson. Other officers celebrated below. Laughter and music drifted up through the hatches. Morrison could not join them. He was thinking about Samar, about the 439 men who died fighting battleships they could not hurt. About the Mark 8 shells that sat unused in magazines while destroyers charged to their deaths. We were too late. He wrote in his journal that night. The shells worked, but we were too late for the men who needed them most. Morrison returned to Pittsburgh in October 1945. The Navy offered him a permanent commission, a career path that could lead to admiral. He declined. "I am a metallurgist," he told his commanding officer, "not a warrior. The war is over. Time to go home." He went back to the steel factory where he had worked before Pearl Harbor. Within a year, he was managing the research department. Within 5 years, he was vice president of operations. His neighbors knew him as a quiet man who kept a small garden and never talked about the war. The Navy tried to give him the Congressional Medal of Honor. The nomination was rejected because his contributions were technical rather than combat-related. Instead, he received the Navy Distinguished Service Medal in a private ceremony attended by 12 people. No newspapers covered the event. No photographers captured the moment. Harold Morrison, the man who helped make Japanese battleships obsolete, faded into anonymity. Dr. Edward Chambers, the lead scientist who had championed the Mark 8 project, died of a heart attack in 1952. He was 63 years old. His obituary in the Washington Post mentioned his contributions to naval ordnance without any specifics. The details were still classified. Admiral Chandler, who had tried to kill the program, retired in 1948 with full honors. He wrote a memoir that never mentioned the Mark 8 or the metallurgist who had proven him wrong. Commander Sarah Chun, the intelligence officer who had found the crucial Japanese intercepts, left the Navy in 1946. She became a professor of Asian languages at Stanford University. In 1967, she published a book about Japanese naval communications during World War II. One chapter mentioned American ammunition developments that terrified Imperial Navy commanders. She never named Morrison, but those who knew understood. Morrison himself rarely spoke about the war. His children grew up knowing their father had served in the Navy. They did not know he had changed the course of naval warfare. He kept his medals in a shoebox in the closet. He never attended reunions. He never gave interviews. Only once, in 1978, did he break his silence. A naval historian tracking down Mark 8 development records found Morrison living in a modest house outside Pittsburgh. The old man agreed to one conversation. Off the record, the historian asked if Morrison regretted anything. Morrison was quiet for a long time. Then he said something the historian never forgot. "I think about Samar every day. Every single day since 1944. Those boys died because we were not ready. Because the Navy did not believe. Because I did not push hard enough, fast enough. The shells worked, but working is not enough. You have to be there when people need you." He paused. "That is the lesson I learned. Being right does not matter if you are too late." But the legacy of Harold Morrison extended far beyond his quiet retirement. The Mark 8 shell remained in service for 46 years. When the Iowa-class battleships were recommissioned during the Korean War, Mark 8 ammunition was loaded into their magazines. The same shells Morrison had helped design were fired at North Korean positions in 1951 and 1952. During the Vietnam War, USS New Jersey used Mark 8 rounds for shore bombardment. The delayed fuse technology proved devastating against fortified bunkers. Vietnamese commanders reported that American shells exploded from inside the earth with no warning. Tunnels collapsed, bunkers vaporized. The weapon designed to kill battleships found new purpose, killing fortifications. In 1991, during Operation Desert Storm, USS Missouri and USS Wisconsin fired their final combat rounds. Some of those shells were Mark 8 variants, improved versions of the original design. They struck Iraqi positions with the same penetrating power that had terrified Japanese admirals half a century earlier. The principles Morrison pioneered spread far beyond naval ammunition. Modern tank shells use delayed fuse mechanisms directly descended from his 1943 design. The M829 armor-piercing round, fired by American Abrams tanks, employs penetration physics he helped discover. Bunker buster bombs dropped on terrorist hideouts used timing circuits based on his chemical delay system. Even medical research benefited. Techniques developed to study shell penetration led to advances in understanding traumatic injuries. The same physics that explained how metal moves through armor helped surgeons understand how bullets move through tissue. 17 nations eventually adopted ammunition based on Mark 8 principles. The Soviet Union reverse-engineered captured shells and developed their own versions. British, French, and German ordnance programs all incorporated delayed detonation technology. Conservative estimates suggest that weapons descended from Morrison's work have been used in over 340 military operations since 1945. The total impact is impossible to calculate, but naval historians agree on one thing. The Mark 8 represented a fundamental shift in how militaries thought about armor and penetration. The age of bigger armor wins ended the moment Morrison's shell punched through that test, played in Virginia. But the most important lesson is not about technology at all. Think about what Morrison faced. He was a civilian, a factory worker with a college degree. He had no military experience, no political connections, no authority to demand anything from anyone. His idea was dismissed as impossible by experts who had spent decades studying naval warfare. Admiral Chandler called it a fantasy. The Bureau of Ordnance rejected it as theoretically interesting, but practically impossible. And yet he persisted. He found allies where others saw obstacles. He turned rejection into motivation. He understood something that most people never learn. Being right is not enough. You have to prove you are right. And sometimes that means breaking rules, risking careers, accepting that success might come too late to save everyone. History is full of similar stories. In 1940, a British engineer named Barnes Wallis proposed a bouncing bomb that could skip across water and destroy German dams. Military leaders called it insane. Wallis built it anyway. Operation Chastis became one of the most famous raids of the war. In 1942, a Navy pilot named John Thatch developed a new fighter formation to counter superior Japanese aircraft. His commanders were skeptical. Thatch proved it worked at the Battle of Midway. The Thatch weave saved hundreds of American pilots. In 1944, an Army doctor named Charles Drew pioneered blood plasma preservation techniques that military authorities initially rejected as too complicated. His methods eventually saved tens of thousands of wounded soldiers. The pattern repeats throughout military history. Innovation comes from unexpected places. The people closest to problems often see solutions that experts miss. And the greatest obstacle to progress is usually not technical difficulty. It is institutional resistance. Morrison understood this. Instinctively, the Navy did not need a better shell. He once told an interviewer decades later, they needed permission to believe a better shell was possible. My job was giving them that permission. Today, military organizations around the world study what they call disruptive innovation. They create programs to identify unconventional ideas. They reward officers who challenge assumptions. The lessons Morrison learned in 1943 are now taught at war colleges from West Point to Sandhurst, but there is one detail that most histories leave out. One secret that remained classified until 2003, and it changes everything about how we understand the Mark 8's true impact. In 1946, American occupation forces in Japan gained access to Imperial Navy archives. Among the captured documents was a folder labeled Threat Assessment, American Super Ammunition. Inside were detailed Japanese analyses of the Mark 8 shell. What the documents revealed was stunning. Japanese engineers had actually figured out how the shell worked. By early 1945, they understood the delayed fuse mechanism and the specialized steel alloy. They knew exactly why their armor was useless against it. But here is the crucial part. The documents also contain something else. A Japanese plan to counter the Mark 8, a proposal to add internal armor layers to Yamato and other surviving battleships. A redesign that, according to Japanese calculations, would have restored meaningful protection against the American shells. The plan was approved by Admiral Toyota on March 28, 1945. Implementation was scheduled to begin on April 15. Yamato sailed on her suicide mission on April 6, 9 days before the modifications could begin. If Operation Tengo had been delayed by just 2 weeks, Yamato might have received upgrades that could have partially neutralized the Mark 8's advantage. The mathematics were clear in Japanese engineering reports. The modified armor would have reduced penetration depth by approximately 40%. Enough to potentially save vital machinery spaces. Enough to give Yamato a fighting chance in a surface engagement. The timing of Yamato's final mission was not determined by American actions. It was determined by Japanese desperation to support troops on Okinawa. A decision made without knowledge that salvation was only days away. Morrison never learned about these documents. They were not declassified until 8 years after his death, in 1995, but the revelation answers a question that haunted him for 50 years. What if we had faced Yamato in a surface battle? The answer buried in Japanese archives was this. If they had met even a month later, the outcome might have been very different. The Mark 8 arrived at precisely the right moment in history, a few weeks earlier, and production would not have been sufficient. A few weeks later, and Japanese countermeasures might have blunted its impact. Morrison's weapon did not just work. It worked at the exact moment it needed to work. Harold Morrison died on September 12, 1995. He was 87 years old. His obituary in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette described him as a retired steel executive and World War II veteran. It mentioned his Navy Distinguished Service Medal. It said nothing about shells or battleships or the secrets he carried for half a century. At his funeral, a former Navy captain spoke briefly. One of the few surviving officers who knew the full story. Harold never wanted recognition. The captain, clears throat, said. He wanted results. He got them. And because of what he did, sailors came home who otherwise would not have. That is the only monument he ever needed. Morrison was buried in a small cemetery outside Pittsburgh. His gravestone lists his name, his dates, and a simple inscription he had chosen himself. He tried to make things better. No mention of shells. No mention of battleships. No mention of the weapon that changed naval warfare forever. Just 7 words that captured everything about the man. So let me ask you something right now. Somewhere in the world, there's another Harold Morrison. Someone with an idea that experts call impossible. Someone fighting institutional resistance. Someone who sees a solution that nobody else believes in. Maybe it is a scientist working on clean energy. Maybe it is an engineer designing safer vehicles. Maybe it is a doctor developing new treatments. Maybe it is someone you know. Maybe it is you, from a factory worker in Pittsburgh, with an idea everyone called insane, to a weapon that made the world's mightiest battleships helpless in 30 seconds. Harold Morrison proved that innovation does not require genius. It requires courage, the courage to be wrong, the courage to be laughed at, the courage to keep working when everyone tells you to stop. And because of that courage, the Mark 8 shell served for 46 years across 3 wars on 4 continents. It influenced weapons development in 17 nations. It saved lives that can never be counted. That is the power of refusing to give up. If this story moved you, share it. Not for views or likes, but because somewhere out there someone needs to hear that their crazy idea might just change the world. History is not made by people who accept what is possible. It is made by people who redefine what is possible. Harold Morrison understood that. And now so do